Hi, everybody, and welcome back to another Langley Lab video brought to you by Langley Consulting, founded by yours truly. Hi, Elle. I'm so glad you're here today. Hi. I am excited to bring this because if you happen to struggle with roles and user administration and figuring out the difference between the two and how to create a role, how to use a role, then this video is likely for you. I'll be covering a lot of the basics of how to create a role, but if you're like many UKG customers, you often get confused of like how to actually create a role that's not going to put your employee data at risk, not expose more PII than necessary, private information of employees. Really, really important. And I'll be going over a couple of nuances, keeping it pretty high level for this video. But if you have any questions, comment down below and we'll be sure to get back to you as soon as we can. And of course, if you like this kind of content, feel free to like and subscribe. Every like pushes us a little forward. It helps us continue putting out this content because we know that there's an audience for it. And if there's any videos you want to see that you haven't seen before, any other how-tos, feel free to comment below and we'll also do our best to bring that kind of content to you as well. So let's get into it. We're going to go into how to create, assign, and use a role in UKG. We are going to go over a couple of basic terms at the very start just to get on the same page of what things are before I go into all this jargon that is probably very UKG specific. So, first off, we have role administration, and this is where you can actually create, edit, and manage roles of users. This isn't where you manage users, just roles. Okay, now that we're on the same page about that, when you go in to create a new role, you are prompted with this first page that's called role type. And this tells the system what buckets of information you want this role to have access to. And I'll point it out when I go through the example. But this is, you want to think about this as like different roles within the organization. You don't want every role to have overlapping buckets, if you will. Sometimes you will. You'll have warranted rights to do that for like payroll roles, maybe some HR roles. But for manager roles, things like that, employee level roles, you want to have a very specific role type dedicated for them. And we'll go over that. Then we have a default role, and that is something that is automatically signed either at new hire or termination events. So in UKG's world, they auto assign a role to every new hire if that's what you choose to do, instead of you having to manually go in and assign an employee role to every new hire. Doesn't make sense. And I've also seen it done for terminations. So at terminations, if you want a default role assigned so that any other roles are stripped away, that is also an option. And then we have something called web access rights. And web access rights, you want to think about this as like the funneled items out of you selecting role type. Role type, whatever you select there, will funnel down to web access rights and permit you to select certain boxes if you have access to them. Otherwise, you may not see everything there. So, for example, if I select a manager role type and I try to go to web access rights and I see a very limited number of options I can select from, it's because I selected only that one role type. So, play around with it, get a feel for it, but often than not, seek advice from your consulting besties like Langley Consulting and make sure it's set up properly, because the worst thing you can do for your employees is to undermine the privacy of their data and grant other people, and a lot of people, access to that data, which presents more risks and opportunities for breaches in your data, which is no good. So that's what we want to avoid. And then, depending again on that role type you select, you'll have the option to run standard reports and give a role access to do those. Standard reports are those canned reports that UKG provides as like a courtesy where, hey, you can't really break these. You can only add filters and groupings and kind of change it very minimally. So it's like a simplified version of BI where you can't really change much of the data in it, but you can filter it, group it, categorize it, show specific date ranges if applicable. So, really cool and often a feature that's made available to managers so that they can perform self service on their own employee information. So, you can always grant view or edit access to those. And jumping over to user administration, which is not the same as role, it is where you can manage user accounts, security, and access for who they can see in the system. This is also where you'd probably perform password resets, suspending accounts, locking accounts in case, you have that kind of termination or that kind of need, always there. And then when you assign a role to an individual, you'll have the option to select what we call qualifiers in the UKG world. Qualifiers are basically filters for what data you will be able to see within the system. Typically, you'll see employee type in there, departments, cost center, depending on what your specific organizational levels are. You can filter so that the role you've designated, if it has the ability to see other people in the organization, you'll have the ability to select qualifiers. Otherwise, you won't have the option to select qualifiers when you add a role to an employee. So, for example, if I were to add an employee role to a new hire, although I wouldn't want to do that manually, but if I was, I wouldn't have the option to add qualifiers because the employee role doesn't permit them to see anybody else in the organization. However, if I selected a manager role and assigned it to somebody, although I'd also want to automate that, then I would probably go down to select their supervisor self and make sure that they can see their own direct reports. That would be a qualifier example. All right, so let's get into creating an actual role. So you are approached, you are the HRS person, and your boss man comes over. We now have a learning and development employee, and they will be in charge of all things career and development in UKG. Cool. They will need access to review and approve whenever someone uploads a document, specifically in career and education. I'm like, okay, that sounds easy enough. I'll go ahead and get started because I watched Langley Consulting's video and I know exactly what to do. And sounds good. I'll get back to you. Here are the first couple of steps. Log into UKG and click on the system configuration icon, which is notated here by that little gear icon. And then go to this part of the menu where you can see security and role administration. That's where we'll start. Then you will click add, which is directed by that plus sign at the top right of the screen. And you will add the role name, which cannot have any spaces, but it can have those special little characters like the ampersand, and then a description. Do yourself a favor, notate this in an external document as to why you created this role because lack of documentation and knowledge as to why a role was created will create muddiness in the future for how you use this role. So, having very clear documentation as to why you're creating this role would be a tip by Hayel. All right. Once you add that description that clearly describes who this role is for or what they'll perform, then you can proceed to select what we already covered at the beginning was role type. And what you'll see here is the role type is kind of like that overarching title of the buckets that you'll get in web access rights in this column. So we'll go over what that looks like in the next page. So, because our boss man said that they wanted to see a learning and development role that could upload and manage everything career and development in UKG, we are going to make sure that they can see all those employees and can access all the career and development information that their heart desires. This is the second page we see here, web access rights. This is where you can select those view, add, edit, delete boxes we talked about. And you will notice that some of these are orange. And the reason that they're orange is they turn that color if not every single item in that column that in the branching trees underneath, like this, the cascading items are not all selected. So it'll appear orange if only a few items are selected underneath that category. And this is kind of like the main branch we're using here. And once you do that, you grant them access to the employee list. And again, anything career and education, including competencies, goals, personal development. And heck, if you have the new development and coaching module, you might need to give them access to that to configure, depending on how your organization likes to do those things. Once you're done, you'll go ahead and go to the next page of document categories. We did skip standard reports access rights, but it's literally, it looks almost similar to this, except it has buckets of reports and you can click view which reports you want them to be able to view. Once you have the documents that they need to upload into their employee profiles clicked as view, then you can click save. And that is the creation of a role. But as you can tell, there's a little hyperlink at the very far right here. And that is indicating that nobody is currently assigned to that role, which is okay because we haven't done that step yet. So let's do that. Let's assign a role. And the assignment of a role will first go to user administration, which is always on top of role administration. We're going to find our new learning and development employee. In our example, we're using Andy Hayden here. And we'll go up to the very top right, click add. We can already tell that Andy has a couple of roles here. He has an employee role and a manager role. And I want to briefly point out that under the manager role, we can already click on this hyperlink that says view employees. And that'll show us exactly who Andy has access to see already in the system. But we're going to do that for learning and development. We're going to add that role, click add, and select the learning and development role we just created. And then we will check this box to permit the role to control who they can see in BI. Now, I have been told that typically you want to only select this in one of the roles that you assign a person. Not every single one of them, which I know a lot of us do, and it's okay. Just know that it will default to the one that has, I think, the most access. So it's not going to like default to the strictest access. It's going to default to the least strict access. So just know that. So here we will also select the qualifiers. This is what we're going to call the qualifiers right below here. We have bus line, we have company, we have region, employee type, employment status. And in our example, we're selecting a handful of companies we want Andy to manage. We're going to say regular employee type and only those that are active or on a leave of absence that they should be able to see, or Andy at least. And then we will select save when we're done. This is not the full extent of all the qualifiers available in that page, but if you're curious about all of them, go ahead, check it out. Use UKG Sandbox environment. Very, very helpful to get your feet wet. And once we've added that learning and development role, we'll want to quickly spot check, right? Because we want to make sure that they can't see anybody they're not supposed to see. Highly recommend performing that audit check on yourself and doing a blank search to see all the employees. So you'll just click that search button because it won't automatically show you everybody. And we have a total of 360 records, which sounds about right in those three companies. So we're going to call it good. And now we are going to do a little bit extra here. Because I talked about how we're going to use the role, we are going to allow employees to now upload documents that are under the category of career and development. So that is what I display here. We're going into the employee role and giving them access to upload into this career and education. Something we don't demonstrate here, but is critical to make sure that they can already upload is under web access rights and making sure that they can do document uploads before going to this page. And then once you're done, you click save. And we're going to go ahead and create an approver role as well. So Andy may not be the only one approving. Maybe they have a couple of HR people as backup because Andy's a one-man show, or, in our hypothetical. Then you would want to create a separate role that approves those kinds of things, maybe licenses, certificates, and maybe it goes towards a pool of some sort of like you get kudos. I don't know. But it is possible. So this role, we're going to repeat the steps we did before, except in role type, we're only going to select user because this is only, think of it as like a shell of an approver that you can then assign to a workflow. And because we don't want this to drive access rights to any specific employees, we want it to be really simple to identify those approvers and assign approvers as needed. So when we go onto web access rights, we're literally selecting just everything underneath requests. Typically, we're not allowing them to delete anything for posterity and other purposes. If they really need to take that kind of action, they can just cancel a request and have the employee resubmit. So really, there is no need to delete, in my opinion, but teach their own. And then you will click save. Now, assigning and using that approver role, you will go to user administration, go back into Andy's profile, and hey, you've already done this once before. We're going to click add and repeat after me. Select from the drop down and select learning and development approver, which is that new role you just created. And voila, they are now an approver, but hey, we haven't assigned it to a workflow. So we need to assign that to the add change employee documents and employee initiated workflow. Now, I'm not going to go too deep into workflow here because we do have a separate video, shameless plug, of how to create a workflow and definitions and stuff like that. That is really cool that Kristen created. Thank you. So feel free to check that out in our library. So you'll want to go to workflow administration, business processes, and search for that add change employee documents and employee type. And on the settings tab, you'll just want to double check all these settings, make sure that it looks right to you. Check off, that people receive emails for it because this workflow has never had a workflow necessarily. So we'll click save and go and add a step, which again, go visit our workflow video if you haven't already. Type in the description and select that role we just created, that shell that will be the approver. And it'll be a role type. So it'll send it to basically everybody in that approver role. And something I don't mention on here step by step, but we did add a condition here that if the category is career and education, it's submitted by the employee in that category, it will go through approval. Otherwise, we don't care and it shouldn't go to Andy anyways. All right. And then, of course, enabling approvals. Don't forget that. And then finally, click save. All right. And here's a brief bonus of what it would look like for the employee, because why would we leave you hanging on a process we just created? So click on the myself icon as the employee, go into employee documents, and you'll be able to add, because we double checked our employee role and they have access to do this. And then they will choose a file, enter the document title, and typically there will be an SOP or a job aid of some sort for the employees to follow. and they'll have a limited number of categories here to choose from, maybe only career and education. And then they can click save, and the following page will show that there is an approver that's required. And look at that. It's the learning and development approver. So we did it. And it requires them to submit it, and it gives them that big red message to do so. Once it's submitted, it's now in the learning and development approvers inbox. And as you can see here, it gives you the hyperlink. Click into that, and they can take action on it. And this is the drop down where it talked about you can cancel, delegate, request, add comments, own it. There's a lot of stuff in there, drop down. So a lot of options to do there. They can even download the certificate that they're trying to upload before it's actually approved to post on their profile. And once you decide what action you want to take, go ahead and click save. And now you can report back to Boss Man and say, hey, the role's been created, tested, and assigned. And of course, there'd probably be a lot more interactive process in this with asking details of like who should they have access to, what should they be able to do. Highly recommend documenting that. But for a hypothetical scenario, this is it. And voila, your boss man comes back to you and says, wow, that was fast. Thank you. And congratulations, you did it. So we hope you found this presentation helpful. If you are interested in working together or you have questions, feel free to email us at info@langleyconsultingllc.com, and we'll just get in touch, or comment down below. We'd be happy to interact. Of course, I wouldn't be doing my job if I didn't do this, but please like and subscribe if you want more content like this, if you like the vibes, if I pass the vibe check. So feel free to do that. And we hope to see you next time. Take care. Bye.